Within the great crater of Paldea lies the mysterious Area Zero, a place home to such landscapes, such plant life, and such Pokémon as we had never seen. It is inhospitable to human life, and as such, I suspect something altogether unknown to humankind sleeps in its depths. On November 18th, 2022, Pokémon Scarlet and Violet were released worldwide. There were many aspects about the game that were criticized by the community. The game looked visually unpolished, the performance of the game left much to be desired, and the game's progression was an awkward implementation of the open world genre with many flaws. However, there was something about the game that the community at large generally praised. The story of Scarlet and Violet, especially the Way Home quest, was nothing short of magical. The emotional beats that this quest hits are some of the best in the main Pokémon series. The dialogue between your companions as you descend into this bizarre place, finding abandoned research stations with notes that talk about the professor's studies, culminating in an encounter against an AI built to replicate the wishes of the long-gone professor. If you visit the school throughout the main game, you learn about the many rumors surrounding Area Zero and its influence on the history of Paldea. I was taken aback the moment I first entered it because it felt like such an incredible reward. Finally, I was allowed to explore this place. And you know what the best part was? I came out of the way home with more questions than answers. It made me discuss so many theories with so many people, and I gained an appreciation for Pokémon lore that I just didn't have before. Despite how simple the game is on the surface, the mysteries of the region and its history are tied into the main events in such a way that one can't help but notice the cracks and peer into the abyss for a little bit. Why was the Great Crater formed? What is Area Zero? What is Terastallization? Did Hydreigon really reproduce with a robot? No anyways this time. I'm Dream, and I intend to use this series of videos to provide answers to some of those questions. This is going to be a pretty large topic, so let's outline a little bit of methodology before we proceed. I'm going to stick to in-game evidence, some information from the anime, and I may use some fragments that we have seen in leaked documents. While one can question the canonicity of anime content, we do know that the scenario presented in the anime is carefully reviewed by Game Freak to ensure consistency in the world of Pokémon. They are not strangers to preventing certain things from being shown if they think it doesn't fit their worldview of Pokémon, which I personally think is great because it allows me to stop thinking about whether something is canon or not. As for the fragments from leaked documents, I'll stick to only materials talking about Scarlet and Violet. I don't want to look at anything Legends ZA related, as I wish to go into those games as spoiler-free as possible. This series will be divided in a few big chunks, each of them talking about one age of Paldea in chronological order. These ages will cover all the different topics presented in the game. For each of the topics I talk about, I'll present the evidence and give my interpretation. But you are free to tell me what you think in the comments below if you disagree with any of my points. I want to provide my answer, but also an entry point in case you want to start making theories of your own. Think of these videos as a study of what we know, rather than a single explanation. With that said, let's jump into the world of millions of years ago. As you're all aware, a massive crater known as the Great Crater of Paldea exists in the heart of our region. The area inside this crater is called Area Zero, and research of its geological strata and material composition has shown that the crater is in fact over 1 million years old. Around 1 million years ago, a crater was formed at the very center of Paldea. But this is not the start of the story, far from it. It starts further back, with the birth of a single species of Pokémon. We don't know the exact point in time at which they appeared, but what we do know is that Terapagos appeared in the region a long time ago. Teratoga's Pokédex entries in multiple games imply that it is an ancestor of most turtle Pokémon, and that it swam in oceans around 100 million years ago. As such, we can determine that it is likely some Teratoga arrived in the land that would eventually become Paldea, and evolved into Terapagos over the course of time. We know that Terapagos used to be a common Pokemon in this land. Not only is this mentioned in leaked material, but it also explains why Terapagos possesses a gender ratio in the game. This implies it has the ability to reproduce like most other common Pokemon with a gender. Even the official Pokemon website refers to Terapagos as a species that inhabited the Paldea region in a bygone era. As such, we can safely say that plenty of Terapagos used to exist in those ancient times. However, we don't know much else about how this prehistoric Paldea looked like. There aren't many records dating those times, but what we do know is that the region used to be an area with large tectonic activity. That is what the Area Zero journals, the ones we find underground, seem to imply. Two things are of major interest here. First, it is mentioned that the Area Zero Underdepths were formed around 2 million years ago due to tectonic activity and erosion, a million years before the formation of the Great Crater it is under. It is very likely that the Great Crater was a result of a series of cave-ins, starting from the Underdepths and spreading up throughout millions of years until the land above it was torn apart. The second important thing is the mention that there used to be many things, be it living or not living, where the Area Zero Underdepths now exist. This is very interesting when you consider the Pokemon we can find in the Underdepths: Carbink, Glimid, Glimmora, and Terapagos. All of these Pokemon we've mentioned are related to jewels in some way. Carbink has slept underground for hundreds of millions of years since its birth, implying that it's probably the first Pokemon that inhabited these caverns. Glimid and Glimmora are made from crystallized poison, and Terapagos is able to crystallize energy to protect itself. If you look at the Pokemon that inhabit the rest of Area Zero, you'll notice a lot of them don't exactly fit in underground area. Ductrios, Garganical, and some others do, but the vast majority of other Pokemon feel like outsiders, and probably only arrived at the area after the formation of Area Zero as we know it. Most likely, the only true residents of the caverns are those we find in the Underdepths. Okay, so ancient Paldea is a region with highly unstable tectonic plates, and while we don't know much about the fauna of the surface, we know that there's a pretty large density of Carbink and Terapagos life underground. At some point, the Terapagos species nearly goes extinct because of the large amount of cave-ins, and only a few survive. In fact, according to the games, only one survives. How does it survive though? As we can see in the Scarlet Pokédex entry for Terapagos, it has the ability to protect itself by transforming energy into heart crystals. Obviously, because only one Terapagos survives, this means that this ability alone isn't enough to save it. However, what if it were to find an energy strong enough to protect it? This is exactly what happens. The Pokédex entry for the Terastal form implies that its shell is made of crystallized Terastal Energy, which allows it to absorb other moves' energy and transfer it to Terapagos. And what is something that we can only find in the Underdepths? That's right, it's the Stellar type. Here, I'm going to have to explain some terms to make sure we don't mix things up. There's a lot of terminology involved with terastallization, and I want to make sure we know what we're talking about when we discuss things. First, there's the terastal phenomenon. Though the Japanese uses simply terastaru for both the transformation and the terastal phenomenon, it is necessary to differentiate them, as terastal does more than just transform a Pokemon. For example, it powers up machines and enables Sada and Turo's machine from the way home. Then there's terastallization. This refers to a transformation a Pokemon undergoes in which its type changes to its Tera type or its stab bonus is boosted. Thirdly, there's Terastal Energy. This energy is what allows the terastal phenomenon to happen. Although Terapagos is the origin of the phenomenon, the game does not say that it is also the origin of the energy. In fact, because its shell is made out of a crystallized version of this energy, it is more likely that Terapagos simply absorbed it from its surroundings. And finally, there's the Stellar type. This is a type that contains the power of all of the others. In Scarlet and Violet, it shows up only as a Tera type. Okay, with this explanation out of the way, there's something we need to answer. If Terastal Energy and the Stellar type are external to Terapagos and something it absorbs, then where do they come from? There's actually a really interesting answer to this. We don't know. No, seriously, there's not a lot of information about this part in the game. Because of the abundance of star pieces and stardust we can find in the Underdepths, we can theorize that this energy could possibly come from space, but there's not a lot of information about the Stellar type as of now. One interesting possibility is the fact that it's connected to the Legend Plate. Both the Stellar type and the Legend Plate work in similar ways, with the power of every other type, and they both even modify some moves that are normal type to turn them into a different type. While not perfect, it is the best connection we've found so far, but you're absolutely welcome to find a different explanation for this part. I just think this is the most satisfying one for now. Regardless, it is very obvious that Terastal Energy and the Stellar type are connected in some way or another. Okay, cool. We know how ancient Paldea was, we know what Terapagos is, and now we know how it survived the cave-in, through absorbing the dormant Terastal energy and protecting itself with it. The only question now is, what were the effects of this? And what does the Terastal phenomenon exactly consist of? The Terastal phenomenon does a lot of things, and it is very difficult to describe it without a long list of effects. It causes terastallization, but it also makes Pokemon big through the Herba Mystica. It also empowers machinery, so on and so on. I'd like to narrow it down to a single, simple to understand function instead of making it sound like a Deus Ex Machina. And I think we can do that if we understand the fundamentals of terastallization. Terastallization is functionally very simple. It is a temporary transformation that gives a Pokemon a crown made out of jewels and changes its type so that it matches its Tera type. A very important question is raised here. What defines what the Tera type of a Pokemon is? It seems like this could be something as simple as IVs or the nature of a Pokemon, which could make it seem like the Terastal phenomenon is a natural extension of something that is already dormant within Pokemon, but there is a really important difference between those things and Tera types. Normal wild Pokemon only possess Tera types that matches one of their normal types. The only way Lechonk can gain the Fire Tera type, for example, is by exposing it to the Tera Shards. This would not be something that naturally happens in the wild. That is the reason why the only way to obtain rare Tera types is through finding terastallized Pokemon in the wild or through Tera raids. In other words, an exposure to the Terastal phenomenon is necessary to even gain a Tera type that actually changes a Pokemon's type. How does this type change happen though? Notice that to terastallize a Pokemon, you throw your Tera Orb to it. This orb contains crystals extracted from Area Zero, which leak Terastal Energy. This energy reacts with the Tera type of your Pokemon and shifts into a crown. With that out of the way, we can make a guess as to how terastallization works, and even what the Terastal phenomenon is. Simply put, the Terastal phenomenon consists of Terastal energy leaking out of Tera crystals and affecting the things around it to different degrees depending on the level of exposure. Notice how the Terastal phenomenon requires exposure to the crystals. This is alluded to in the Area Zero journals, as it is the proximity to the crystals which allow the Terastal phenomenon to thrive, and it can even become unstable if there is too much exposure. When Terastal energy goes out of control, it can even alter space and time to connect two different timelines, as we see on the Indigo Disc DLC. Some people will look at that and conclude that everything the Terastal phenomenon does has to be related to different timelines, but I believe this needlessly complicates some things. I don't think terastallization necessarily means that there is a version of every Pokemon with every single typing across endless timelines. You can explain that change by saying that the Tera Shards contain energy related to their respective type, and that the Tera Jewel simply absorbs it like we know Terapagos does. You can explain the changes that Herba Mystica cause as the natural terrestrial energy of Paldea soil reacting with the Pokemon that consume it. I believe that the reason the space-time distortion happens is mostly a consequence of an excess of terrestrial energy, as every instance where this happens either has a large concentration of crystals or a mist, probably full of terrestrial energy, that coats the entire area and overwhelms the people in it. Notice how, after your visit to the crystal pool to meet the professor, the game goes back to the title screen, and if you load the game, you wake up on your bed. Very simply, the concentration of terrestrial energy was so powerful it knocked you out. The same happened with Heath, as described in the books. There is one trait about the terrestrial phenomenon that is very interesting though. The eyes on the Tera Jewels, the way the crystals spread across Area Zero and swallow trees and walls and human-made structures, the way Terapagos' cry plays whenever you use your Tera Orb. Terastal does not behave like an inanimate object, but I doubt it's exactly a living thing either, because it seems like it uses other things to act and spread. I believe Terastal energy acts as a form of parasite or virus that has formed a symbiotic relationship with Terapagos, not only because of the things I mentioned, but because of the existence of Glimmet and Glimmora. Their Pokédex entries explain how their petals are made from crystallized poison energy and that they resemble terajewels. This ties them to the Terastal phenomenon, but it is never really explained how that relationship works. I think the answer is very simple. We see Glimmora only in areas related to Terra crystals, often buried in the walls to consume the minerals it feeds upon. Just like how terastallization requires an exposure to terrestrial energy to occur, I believe the implication is that Glimmet and Glimmora need to feed upon terrestrial energy to survive, because that's what gave birth to them in the first place. I don't think it's coincidence that Glimmora's eyes are the same as the ones in the Terajewels. I believe that terrestrial energy is capable of producing life. Herba Mystica are plants, which are living things, and there is an underground crystal tree really close to Terapagos. I think what Game Freak intended to show with that tree imagery is confirm that Terra crystals can indeed make life, that they spread like a virus. It was a subtle way to confirm that Herba Mystica and Glimmora are a product of Terastal. And because of the symbiotic relationship between Terastal Energy and Terapagos, they protected each other. Terapagos almost perished as a result of the cave-ins, so Terastal Energy provided it with a shell to withstand any blows. But maybe this was not enough. What if more cave-ins happened? No, that couldn't be allowed to happen. Its new host could not be allowed to die. So then, the Terra crystals spread all over the Underdepths, covering every crevice and every fault to stop all tectonic movement in Paldea, maybe terraforming the region in the shape of its new friend along the way. It even made plants and created Glimmora as a way to protect their beautiful underground paradise. And who knows, if Terapagos grew lonely, why not give adventurers a reason to make it all the way down in the future? This is the story of Terapagos, Terastallization, and the Underdepths created 2 million years ago. But this is only the start of a much larger story. Next time, we'll talk about what caused the Great Crater to happen and the ancients that partook too much in their own curiosity. I hope you enjoyed the video. I don't know if I'm the only one who went through this, but when the Indigo disc released, I felt really confused because I thought they were going to explain way more about Terapagos, Paradox Pokemon, and other things about Scarlet and Violet, and they ended up not doing that. Time has passed, I've sort of managed to craft a theory that makes sense to me, and I just hope you look forward to what's to come. Before the video ends though, I want to give a few shoutouts to some of my friends, including Giscame, for not only reviewing this script, but also just making really cool theories. I recommend checking them out. You'll see a lot of in-depth analysis on aspects that I didn't even touch upon, so please give them a little bit of your time if you can. With that, I'll see you next time.